They pushed their fence 10 feet onto my land. And for a while, I just stood there staring at it, hands on my hips, thinking maybe I was the one losing my mind. But I wasn't. And what I did next, well, let's just say it made sure nobody ever questioned where my land ended again. I've been on that piece of Texas dirt just shy of 20 years now, long enough that the wind knows my name, long enough that I can tell which cow's limping before I even get close. It ain't a big operation by any stretch, but it's honest, 40 acres of pasture, a weathered red barn that leans just a little to the east, and enough cattle to keep the lights on and my hands busy. It's quiet out there, the kind of quiet that city folks think they want until they actually hear it. That's where the trouble started, I guess, city folks. About 2 years back, the place next to mine got sold. Old man Jenkins used to live there, kept to himself mostly, good neighbor. We'd wave across the fence line, swap tools now and then, never had a problem. When he passed, his kids sold the land to a couple from Dallas, the kind of people who say they're escaping the noise, but bring all of it with them anyway. Their names were Grant and Lila Mercer, though around here folks just called them the Mercers, with a tone that said enough. First time I saw the place after they got done with it, I almost laughed. Glass walls, metal roof shining like a mirror, a pool out back like they were expecting a magazine crew to show up any minute. It didn't fit, not with the dust, not with the cattle, not with the way the land actually works. But hey, it was their money. At first, we got along fine, better than fine really. Grant came over one afternoon, hands too clean for a man claiming to want country life, asking where to buy feed, what kind of fencing holds up best in storms. I helped him out, pointed him to a decent supplier, even let him borrow my tractor when their landscaping project got out of hand. Lila would wave when she saw me fixing fence, sometimes brought over store-bought pie like that made us neighbors overnight. I didn't mind, figured they'd either learn or they'd leave. Turns out they learned, just not the things that mattered. It started small, like it always does. Their dogs first, big, energetic things, no training to speak of. One morning I'm out checking the herd, and I see them chasing a calf clear across the pasture, barking like they own the place. I ran them off, brought the calf back, and that evening I walked over, kept it polite, told Grant, "Hey, your dogs got into my herd today. Can't have that." He smiled, that kind of tight smile people use when they're not really listening. "Oh, they're just playing," he said, like my livestock was part of their entertainment. I let it slide once. Then came the grandkids. Weekends mostly. ATVs buzzing like flies, cutting straight through my pasture instead of using their own land. I'd be mending fence or checking water lines, and suddenly here they come, tearing across like it's some kind of theme park. First time, I waved them down, told them easy. "Hey, this ain't a trail. You need to stay on your side." They nodded, polite enough. Kids usually are. Next weekend, same thing. So I went back over, this time a little firmer. Not rude, just clear. Lila answered the door, sunglasses on like she was heading somewhere important. I explained it again, slower this time, and she just tilted her head, gave me that look, like I was making a big deal out of nothing. "They're just kids," she said. "It's open land." And right there, that's when I felt it shift. Because to me, that land wasn't open. It was everything I'd worked for, every early morning, every late night, every storm I rode out instead of running from. But to them, it was scenery. Still, I didn't push it further. Out here, you try to keep the peace if you can, no sense starting a war over things that might settle themselves. But they didn't settle. They got worse. More dogs, more noise, more little moments where I'd catch them treating that invisible line between our properties like it didn't exist at all. I started documenting things, nothing fancy, just notes in a small pad I keep in my truck. Dates, times, what happened. Old habit, my father used to say. If trouble's brewing, write it down before it boils. Turns out he was right. Because one morning, early, sun barely up, that soft golden light hitting the grass just right. I walked out to check the fence line on the north side, coffee still warm in my hand, and that's when I saw it. At first, it didn't even register. A fence, new, clean, cedar panels, metal posts sunk deep, the kind of thing you don't just throw together overnight. It stretched across the pasture like it had always been there, straight as a ruler, solid as anything. And completely wrong. I stood there a long time, just looking at it, taking a sip of coffee, then another, like maybe it'd move if I gave it a minute. It didn't. So I walked it, step by step, boots sinking into familiar ground, counting distance the way you do when you've lived somewhere long enough. And with every step, that feeling in my gut got heavier, because I knew where that line was. And this wasn't it. I went back to the house, dug out my survey maps, old papers, worn edges, but clear as day, sat at the kitchen table, spread them out, traced the boundary with my finger like I'd done 100 times before. No mistake, not even close. They hadn't just nudged over a little, they'd planted that fence a full 10 feet inside my land. 10 feet might not sound like much to some folks, but out here, that's principle. That's the difference between what's yours and what someone else thinks they can take. I folded the map, set my coffee down, and just sat there for a minute, quiet. Not angry, not yet. Just thinking. Because I'd seen this kind of thing before, not exactly like this, but close enough. People testing boundaries, seeing what they can get away with, betting on the other guy being too polite, too tired, or too unsure to push back. They were betting wrong. That evening, I walked over to their place, map in hand, dust still on my boots, rehearsing the words in my head, keeping it calm, keeping it simple. No need to escalate. Not yet. Grant answered the door, Lila just behind him, both of them looking like I'd interrupted something important. "There's been a mistake," I said, holding out the survey. "Your fence, it's over my property line. About 10 feet. Grant barely glanced at the paper. Lila didn't even pretend to look. "We hired professionals," she said, arms crossing slowly. "I'm sure it's exactly where it's supposed to be." I nodded once, patient. "I checked the survey," I replied, "and I've lived on that line for 20 years. It needs to be moved." That's when she smiled, not friendly, not polite, just a little curl at the corner of her mouth like she'd already decided how this was going to go. "Well," she said, "you're not really using that strip anyway." And there it was. Not a mistake, not confusion. A decision. I stood there a second longer than I needed to, letting that settle. Then I nodded again, slower this time. "All right," I said quietly. "We'll figure it out." And I turned, walked back across that land they thought they understood, already knowing this wasn't going to end with a simple conversation. Because some people don't listen until you speak in a language they can't ignore. I didn't go back the next day, or the day after that. That probably surprised them. Folks like the Mercers expect one of two things. Either you roll over and accept it, or you come back loud, angry, ready to fight. What they don't expect is quiet, the kind of quiet where someone's thinking 3 steps ahead. Truth is, I wasn't avoiding the problem. I was studying it. Every morning I'd walk that fence line again, slow and steady, coffee in hand, boots brushing against grass that had always been mine. That new cedar fence stood there like it belonged, clean lines, polished boards, expensive enough that I knew they'd thought this through, or at least thought they had. I started noticing little things. The way the posts were sunk, deep, professional work. Whoever built it wasn't guessing, which meant either the Mercers had given them the wrong boundary, or they'd been told the right one and chose to ignore it. Either way, it told me something important. This wasn't an accident you fix with a handshake. So I made a call. County office first. Same number I'd used years back when a storm knocked down half a mile of fencing and I needed to confirm easements. Told them I had a boundary issue, possible encroachment. They transferred me twice before I got a man named Harris. Voice sounded like gravel, the kind of guy who's seen every version of neighbor disputes there is. "Got a survey?" he asked. "Got 2, I said. "Mine and the original filed with the county." "Good," he replied. "Don't argue with them. Let us do the talking." That suited me just fine. A few days later, Harris came out, pickup older than mine, clipboard in hand, tape measure hanging off his belt. We walked the line together, him double-checking everything, making notes, nodding to himself like he already knew how this would end. At one point he stopped, tapped the top of one of those cedar panels, and let out a low whistle. "They didn't go cheap," he said. "No," I replied. "They didn't." He looked at me then, not unkind, just direct. "You planning to push this?" I didn't hesitate. "It's my land." He gave a short nod. "All right then." By the end of it, he had everything he needed. A week later, the notice went out, formal, stamped, the kind of letter that makes things real. Remove the fence or face fines. Clear, simple, no room for interpretation. I figured that might do it, not because they respected me, but because they'd have to respect paperwork. I was wrong. They ignored it. Just carried on like nothing had happened. Pool parties on weekends, dogs running loose, grandkids back on those ATVs, and that fence still sitting there, 10 feet into my land like it had roots. That's when I stopped thinking about fixing the problem and started thinking about ending it. See, there's something most people don't understand about land. It's not just about where the line is, it's about how you defend it. Let something sit long enough. Let someone use it like it's theirs, and sooner or later they start believing it, and sometimes the law listens. Adverse possession. Ugly phrase, but real. I'd seen it happen once when I was younger. Neighbor lost a strip of land because he didn't act in time. Always stuck with me. So I called someone else my lawyer. Name's Daniel Reeves. Not flashy, not cheap, but sharp. We'd worked together once before on a water rights issue. When I told him what was going on, he got quiet for a second, then said, "You did right calling the county first. That helps. But if they're ignoring it, you need to establish control." Meaning? I asked. Meaning you make it undeniable that the land is yours, actively used, visibly occupied. Not tomorrow now. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window toward that fence. What if I build on it? He didn't miss a beat. If it's your land, you can build whatever you want. Just make sure it's within code, permitted, all of it clean. You don't give them anything to use against you. And them? I asked. They're already in the wrong, he said. Now you just make it expensive. That word stuck with me. Expensive. Not just money, time, effort, stress, the kind of cost that makes people wish they'd never started something. I hung up, sat there a while, and let the idea take shape. A barn. Not the old red one I already had, something new. Solid. Functional. Positioned exactly where it needed to be. Right along that fence. The next few days were busy. Permits filed, materials ordered, a crew brought in. Not a big crew. Just a couple guys I trust. Men who know how to work without asking too many questions. I told them what I needed, showed them the survey, marked the line myself. One of them, a guy named Luis, looked at the fence, then back at me. "You sure about this?" he asked. I smiled a little. I've never been more sure of anything. We started early. Sun barely up, engines running. The sound of work cutting through that quiet the Mercers claimed they loved so much. At first, they didn't come out. Probably thought it was just regular farm business. But as the frame started going up, long, straight, stretching the length of that boundary, I saw the curtains move in their big glass house. By day 2, they knew. By day 3, they were nervous. And by the end of the week, they were furious. The barn wasn't fancy, didn't need to be. Steel roof, wood siding, built to last, and built for purpose. The kind of structure that belongs on land like mine. I made sure of one thing, though. One very specific detail. The backside of that barn, the longest wall, ran right up against their precious cedar fence. Not touching, no. I stayed within code. But close enough that there wasn't any space to breathe between them. Close enough that whatever happened inside that barn, they were going to experience it. We finished just before the weekend. That's when I moved the cattle in. Now, if you've never been around livestock, let me paint you a picture. It's not quiet, it's not clean, and it sure as hell isn't something you want drifting through the open windows of your designer home. Hay, manure, the sound of hooves shifting, low calls in the early morning. It's life, real life, the kind they said they wanted. I made sure the barn was active, feeding twice a day, early and late. Lights on before sunrise, movement all through the evening. Nothing excessive, just normal operations. But normal, out here, is a lot for someone who thought they were buying a postcard. It didn't take long. About 4 days in, I was out back, checking feed levels, when I heard it, footsteps, fast, angry. I turned, and there they were. Grant in front, Lila right behind him, both of them looking like they'd finally realized they weren't in control anymore. "You can't do this," Grant snapped, stopping just short of the barn wall. I wiped my hands on my jeans, took my time turning toward them. "Do what?" "This," he said, gesturing wildly. "This building, this smell, this noise, it's right on our fence." I nodded once, calm as ever. "It's on my land." Lila stepped forward then, voice sharper. "You're doing this on purpose." I met her eyes, didn't look away. "So were you." That hit. You could see it, that moment where they realized this wasn't going to bend the way they expected. Grant tried a different angle, legal tone now. "We'll take this to court." I shrugged just slightly. "You're welcome to." What I didn't say, what I didn't need to say, was that I'd already been there in my head, already walked through every outcome. They stood there a second longer, the smell from the barn already settling in around them, the reality of it starting to sink in. Then they turned and walked back, not saying another word. And that's when I knew. It was working. After that little showdown by the barn, things got real quiet between us. Not peaceful quiet, more like the kind you get right before a storm rolls in, where the air feels heavy and you know something's coming. You just don't know exactly when it's going to hit. The Mercers stopped waving, stopped pretending. Their dogs disappeared first, probably locked up or sent somewhere else, which honestly was the one decent decision they made in all of this. The grandkids stopped riding through my pasture too, not because they suddenly understood boundaries, but because someone finally told them there were consequences now. And that fence still sitting there, boxed in tighter every day by that barn. A couple weeks went by like that. I stuck to my routine, feeding cattle, fixing what needed fixing, keeping everything steady. But behind the scenes, things were moving. The county didn't forget. Another notice came through, this one less polite. Fines, deadlines, legal language that doesn't leave much room for pride. I didn't see it myself, but I heard about it. Small towns talk, even when you're not in one. A guy at the feed store mentioned seeing Grant arguing on the phone in the parking lot, red in the face, waving papers around like they might change if he shook them hard enough. Didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was how long they kept holding out. Most folks, when it starts costing them money, they fold. Pride's one thing, but checks have a way of bringing reality back into focus. Not them, though. They doubled down, hired a lawyer, tried to challenge the survey, claimed the boundary was unclear, said the contractor must have been given bad information. Every excuse you can think of when you're trying to back out of a bad decision without admitting you made one. Didn't work. Because facts are stubborn things. About a month after that first notice, it finally reached the point where it had to be settled properly court. Now, I'm not a man who enjoys that kind of setting. Too many words, not enough common sense sometimes. But I showed up, clean shirt, boots polished as best they could be, documents in hand. Daniel was there already, calm as ever, flipping through papers like it was just another Tuesday. The Mercers came in a few minutes later, dressed sharp, confident on the surface, but you could see it underneath. That tightness around the eyes, the kind people get when things aren't going the way they thought they would. We didn't speak. Didn't need to. When the case started, it was straightforward. Survey maps, county records, inspection reports, everything lined up clean. Harris even showed up, gave his statement, same calm certainty he had the day we walked the land. The Mercer's lawyer tried. I'll give him that. Talked about misunderstandings, intent, contractor error, tried to paint it as a simple mistake blown out of proportion. But then Daniel stood up. And he didn't raise his voice, didn't get dramatic, just laid it out piece by piece. The notices they ignored. The clear boundary lines. The continued use of land that wasn't theirs. And then, the part that mattered most. Your Honor, he said, steady as stone, my client acted not out of spite, but out of necessity. In this county, prolonged encroachment can open the door to adverse possession claims. By building a permitted structure on his own land, he protected his legal rights, rights that were already being challenged by the defendant's actions. That word came back again. Expensive, not just money mistakes. The judge didn't take long. Ruling came down clear. The fence had to go. Fines upheld. No ambiguity, no compromise. And just like that, it was over. Well, not quite. Because removing that fence, that turned out to be the hardest part for them. See, when they built it, they had full access, open space, easy angles, plenty of room to work. But now there was a barn sitting right up against it. My barn. They couldn't just bring in a crew and tear it down the way they built it. No space for equipment on my side, and I sure wasn't about to move anything to make it easier. Everything had to be done from their side, panel by panel, piece by piece, slow and careful, so they didn't damage my structure in the process. I watched it happen over the next week. Didn't stand there the whole time. I've got better things to do. But every now and then, I'd pause, lean against the fence post by the old pasture, and just take it in. Workers sweating in that Texas sun, carefully unscrewing boards, lifting sections out like they were defusing something fragile. Grant was out there a lot too, pacing, talking on his phone, frustration written all over him. Lila showed up once or twice, didn't stay long. Guess the smell from the barn wasn't something she wanted to stand next to for very long. I never said a word to them during that time. Didn't need to. The sound of that fence coming apart said enough. By the end of it, the line was clear again. Open, honest, exactly where it had always been. Grass already starting to settle back into place like nothing had ever happened. Except something had. Because they'd lost more than just a fence. They'd lost money, thousands of dollars between construction, fines, legal fees, and removal. They'd lost time, energy, whatever sense of control they thought they had when they first decided that 10 feet didn't matter. And maybe, just maybe, they learned something. Or maybe they didn't. Hard to say. We don't talk anymore. Sometimes I'll see them from a distance. Grant walking the edge of his property, slower now, like he's paying attention to where he steps. Lila keeps to the house mostly, those big glass windows reflecting the land instead of opening up to it. As for me, every morning, I still walk out to that barn. Same routine, boots on, coffee in hand, cattle waiting. The air's got that mix of hay and earth, steady and familiar. And right there along that sidewall, the one that runs closest to where their fence used to be, I always pause for a second. Not long, just enough to tip my hat. Not to them, not really, but to the lesson. Because land, it's a simple thing, until someone decides it isn't. And when they do, you've got a choice. You can argue. You can let it slide. Or, you can make sure the line stays exactly where it belongs. Now here's the part I'll leave with you. Some folks around here said I went too far, that I could have handled it cleaner, quicker, maybe even saved everyone the trouble. Others said I did exactly what needed to be done, that if I hadn't pushed back the way I did, I might have lost more than just 10 feet in the long run. Truth is, I know why I did it, but I'm curious what you think. Was it justified, or did I cross a line of my own? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd probably expect. And if you've ever had a neighbor test your boundaries, I'd like to hear how you handled it. Because out here, or anywhere really, respect's a two-way road. And not everybody learns that the easy way.